On. Hello, everybody. Ooh, I forgot I made it loud. Welcome to Community Conversations. My name is Courtney Shaw. I'm the facilitator of the series, and I wanted to do a quick announcement before we get going today. Next week is our final Community Conversations event of the fall series. So we have Michael Strayer coming, and he's going to talk about the mystery of male depression. So please come join us for that one. And then we are off. The rest of the quarter is like we're not going to be here on Thanksgiving. I hope you're not going to be here on Thanksgiving. So go do Thanksgiving things. And we will be off until we don't exactly know when. I know we're on hiatus for winter. We're seeing about spring. We're still kind of looking into that as far as, the logistics of everything. But keep an eye on our website at lowercolumbia.edu/conversations. That will update with future events and future schedules. And in the meantime, we've got a whole lot of archives that you can go back to and see years now of previous events if you're curious about what are the things that you might have missed in the past. So please do that. Also, I get to announce a speaker for today that I'm very excited about. Hiedi Bauer has been teaching English at Lower Columbia College for 19 years now. Some of her favorite books include Cheryl Strayed's Wild and Henry David Thoreau's Walden. Books like these have inspired her to take her own long walks in the woods, and these long walks have inspired her to simplify her own life. She has hiked the entire length of Oregon on the Pacific Coast Trail, so she knows what she's doing. Please welcome Hiedi Bauer.
Hello. So I started hiking sections of the Pacific Crest Trail in 2018. And when I started hiking, it was 40 miles, 4 days, Highway 26 in Oregon to Timothy Lake and back. And then the hikes just started getting longer and longer. So the next year I started around Sisters, Oregon, and I walked to Timberline Lodge. And then the next year I started in the same place, but walked to the Washington, Oregon border, and eventually all of Oregon. And then this last summer, I just finished off Washington. I did from Leavenworth to Canada, which is about 200 miles. So I've been doing this for a while. And when you're walking on the trail, you don't have ready answers to a lot of questions. A lot of interesting questions come to mind either because you're looking at strange things or having strange panics. And you don't have ready access to the technology that we have here in civilized life to get those quick answers. I have my phone with me, but I need to use it for navigation and sometimes light. And so I don't want to drain the battery. And in this last hike in Washington State, it's one of the most isolated portions of the Pacific Crest Trail. And I didn't do my research ahead of time, so I didn't know that there's actually no cell phone communication at all, which meant that my family didn't hear from me for the entire 200 miles because there was no reception. So the ready answers aren't available to you when you're out on the trail. And the questions arise in a different way. They tend to arise more slowly, and they often tend to arise out of desperation because you're so darn bored because you just are walking the same path over and over and over every day. And after a while, you're like, yes, yes, those are trees. What else can I think about? So you're walking around and you're thinking, and you have these curiosities. And sometimes these curiosities lead to wild speculations. In fact, when I was talking to the trail crew leader that I was on a trail maintenance project with, Jake Rodden, I was telling him that I want to talk about how we get curious on the trail and we often start pondering some bigger mysteries. And Jake was like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You get two hikers, they meet. The first thing they do is they get curious and then they speculate wildly. And then maybe there's an answer, but that wild speculation always happens. So sometimes you get a straightforward answer. Sometimes you get absolutely no answer. And sometimes you get a deeper understanding of some of life's greater mysteries. But I wanted to start not by talking about those kinds of curiosities and those kind of answers, but I wanted to start by contrasting what those curiosities look like in more civilized life. So I'm going to read to you my most recent 6 questions that I have asked Perplexity. So Perplexity is my personal artificial intelligence app that my husband put on my phone. And these are the last 6 things that I have asked it. a lunch recipe that uses Campbell Fiesta cheese condensed soup, stale pretzel bites, and cannellini beans that is healthy. Perplexity's like, I've gotcha. A healthy lunch using Campbell's Fiesta cheese condensed soup, stale pretzel bites, and cannellini beans can be made as a cheesy bean skillet. That goes on from there. The next one is recipes that use Trader Joe's peri peri sauce, which I should have probably also asked Perplexity, how do you pronounce peri peri sauce? It's got me. Trader Joe's peri peri sauce is a versatile condiment known for its tangy, spicy, and it goes on. 3, how do I get my headphone microphone to work on my Chromebook? Of course, Perplexity's got my back. Replacement bulb? Because I can just be so passive about this. I can just take a picture of a lamp and be like, help. And Perplexity's like, to determine the correct replacement bulb for your lab, you only need to check 2 main things. And then it goes on from there. So how many is that? I'm only going to give you 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, create a summary and response prompt. We're first-year college students. So on occasion, I have it helping me with my assignment prompts. And then I found some books I wanted to sell, and I was asking if Abe Books is generally considered trustworthy and secure. So these are my ready answers and the questions that I ask on impulse at any moment where I have my phone in civilized life. But when curiosity meets the mysteries of uncivilized life, that can look a little bit different. So sometimes you get no answers. Sometimes you shouldn't experiment by eating the mushroom. So clearly there are interesting curiosities that happen on the trail, but can it engage us with these chewier mysteries, the grand thought experiments, the ones that you might speculate wildly on, but perhaps receive nothing more than a slightly greater understanding because humankind has been considering these things since humankind has been considering things. So if you're thinking about these grand thought experiments, the things that relate to the human condition, the nature of existence, one place that you could go is the paradox of the ship of Theseus. And I could pull up Perplexity, or I could Google it. And I could ask you it to explain to you the mystery of the ship of Theseus, but I don't want to start with that. What I want to start with is a less civilized way of coming to that question and coming to that understanding. Or another way of thinking about that is to how you would be engaging with a paradox like this in the wild. So you've probably heard the phrase blood, sweat, and tears before. And when you're on the trail, you definitely have blood, sweat, and tears. So this is from this last summer. And when I was coming up to this section, I'm walking through this beautiful alpine meadow, and the pikas are meeping, and the marmots are whistling, and it's a sunny day. The views are stunning. And I see a helicopter flying overhead, which, fun fact, marmots freak out at helicopters and they all start whistling at once, and that's kind of fun. So this helicopter flies overhead, and I'm thinking, I wonder what that helicopter is all about. And I came to the pretty quick assumption that it was probably a fire suppression effort, right? If you live on the West Coast in August, and this was in August, you know that there are a lot of fires. And it's not uncommon if you're out in the wilderness to see a helicopter going by and it's going to, I don't know what they do, like dip water from lakes and dump it somewhere else. They're doing something to fight the fires. So I see this helicopter and I think to myself, it's probably fighting a fire. But as I keep walking, and I'm going north because, Canada is the destination here, I had these southbounders, or what we called SOBOs, coming the other way. And that's how you often get answers or news on the trail. I like it because it comes not instantaneously, but at a human pace, right? You have to walk until you meet a human, and then the human has to tell you things. And so I was like, is there fire? Because I saw this helicopter, and they're like, oh, no. No, that was a medical evacuation. And in fact, not only was that a medical evacuation, but that was the 5th medical evacuation in the couple of days since I had started this particular hike. And they were all coming out of the same section. And the reason that all these people were getting medically evacuated was because there were 200 downed trees, only 40 that were problematic. These are problematic trees in this next section. And people are falling and breaking bones. Um, I'm not sure what else was happening. I know at least one person was lying beside the trail with a broken leg. And I experienced an almost not quite this. I was climbing over a tree about the size of that one on your right. And the trail was sloping down. So you've got the tree here and then, it's downhill. And so you clamber up to the top of the tree and then you look over and you're like, okay, I'm halfway done. Now I have to get down. And the trail's slipping away from me. So you throw your poles over and then you go to get down. And then you realize that all that rain has made it quite muddy. And if you're like me, you finally get one foot on the trail and it slips and you go bumpity bump, bump, bump down the trail. And your stuff is going bumpity bump, bump, bump here and here and there and there. So you're covered in mud. Thank you, trail. There's now a piece of me on the trail. So you're either clambering over the trees and you're trying to get down without sliding and falling on your behind. Sometimes you just scoot across the top of the tree, and a lot of us wear running shorts. That's me up on the top left there. And when you're scooting across the top of the tree and there's bark, there's a good chance you're going to end up with splinters under those shorts. So that happened. Sometimes you have to go under the tree, and sometimes when you're climbing over the tree, you catch these things that are called stobs. So you can kind of see them there and there. And these stobs are wicked sharp. And I have the very poor luck of pretty consistently, when I throw a leg over a tree, catching that leg on the other side and bloodying my legs blood pretty effectively. I don't know how I did it, but I also bloodied up one of my knees pretty effectively. So when I was crawling under, I think it was that tree, I'm trying to swing my way under. This got to actually be a lot of fun. At one point, I was talking to one of my hiking buddies, Shortcut, and we were just treating it like our personal playground at some point. So I'm trying to swing under the tree, and I can't really crawl under the tree because I've got a bloody knee and I don't want to crawl on the knee. And it was early in the morning and I actually had a mug of coffee. So I'm trying to swing under this tree and not crawl except for with one knee and also not spill my coffee. And Shortcut was behind me and she's like, "You did it." So there's a lot of blood on the trail. And I didn't leave it all out there, but I definitely left little parts of me all along the trail. And I definitely left parts of me all across the trail. And I also might have brought some of the trail back home with me. So it's not just blood, right? It's also sweat and tears. Actually, I'm going to stay over here because there's a couple of pictures. So if we're thinking about the sweat portion of the trail, this is the approach to Mount Jefferson from the south side. And what you'll notice that there's a body of water there. And so the trail kind of curves around this body of water. And this is going to be your last water for a while. There's going to be some up and over that hill, but it's coming off the glacier, and glaciers are really silty and they'll clog your filter. So this is going to be the last place you can get water for a while. It's a hot August afternoon, so this water is pretty warm, right? So you fill up what you need for a very long climb. It's August, it's hot, sweat, afternoon. And then the climb goes through that burned out section, also known as absolutely no shade. So you're climbing, it's hot, your water is warm at best. You're sucking it down, it's just seeping out through your skin. I feel a little bit like the character in Project Hail Mary when Rocky the alien looks at him and says, "Humans leak. I am just leaking all over this trail." And I drank so much water, so I'm taking the water in. I'm taking the trail in. I'm sweating the trail out. My stomach is sloshing around. I finally get to the top. The next day, I realized that I'd also given myself a really lovely case of heat exhaustion. And I knew this because as I was climbing up over that shoulder, and then you're descending onto a glacier that you have to climb down, I'm cheerfully dry heaving along the way because apparently that's a symptom of heat exhaustion. So lots of sweat, fair amount of blood, lots of sweat, but that's not when I cried. So the tears happened here. And this is the for me, the most infamous part of at least the parts of the PCT that I've hiked, and I've done all of Oregon and all of Washington by now. This is the Goat Rock's spine. It's just north of Mount Adams. It's between Mount Adams and Mount Rainier. And those arrows are pointing to, yes, that's where the trail is. And it clings to the side, as you can see, to the side of the hills. And as you can see, it's a pretty steep drop off on either side. And sometimes you're walking right along the ridge. What you can't really see in this picture is the part where the trail is quite narrow and rather crumbly. So you take the one wrong step and you're watching all the little scree go down to where you don't want to be. What you can't see here is how many times I fell directly on my butt and had a hard time getting back up again because I was rather scared. And what you cannot see in this picture is just how long the spine is. It goes for 4 miles. So I get to the middle of this and there's no water up there. Like to get down to those glaciers to melt snow to get water, it's not going to be a safe endeavor. It is not the solution to this problem. There is no food up there. It is getting dark. I am in the middle of this and it is 4 miles long. And these climbs are steep up and they are steep down. And the downs are scarier because it's easier to fall. So I get to the middle of this and I call home and I'm just sobbing. And my dear husband, he asks, honey, what's the worst that could happen? And I'm like, I could die. I didn't die, but I was very scared. And so there's your sweat, there's your tears. But if humans leak, we don't just leak blood, sweat, and tears. Sometimes we also pee. Um, One of the bigger nuisances on the trail is actually deer, because deer love to treat human beings like their own personal salt lick. If you're new to hiking and if you haven't heard the advice, you always put your trekking poles in your tent. And you can see my trekking poles just at the bottom of the picture there. Because the ones with the cork handles, your hands will sweat into them and they get nice and salty. And the deer will not only go and lick your handles, the deer won't just go and chew your handles. They will straight up steal your trekking poles. So you have to bring them into your tent. My trekking poles actually act as tent posts, tent poles. So I don't have to worry about that because if they weren't in my tent wouldn't be up. Um, but yeah, they're a nuisance. And then not only are they a nuisance in that way, this was early in the morning just south of Stehekin, which is up on Lake Chelan. It's a really cute little town that you cannot reach except for by foot or by plane or by boat. It has no roads to this town. So I was walking into Stehekin. This was the morning just before that. And I had peed because that's what humans do. And the deer was chasing me out of my campsite because it's like, thank you for the salt lick. Now get out. So, and then when you're not peeing, there are other things happening. And I won't talk in detail about it, but I will show you the outdoor toilet with the best view on the PCT. And I was talking to my friend Shortcut, that's her trail name, about this presentation. And I told her that I had a picture of an outdoor toilet with the best view on the PCT. And she's like, oh, is it the one just outside of Mica Lake? And I'm like, yes, actually it is just the one outside of Mica Lake. So we had a special moment. So I am just leaving these pieces of myself all over the Pacific Crest Trail. There's blood there, there's sweat there, there's tears there. And it's not just one way, right? Because I'm drinking the water, I'm breathing in the air. And if you have those fires and that smoke, for me, for some reason, they're always right behind me. So there's this joke that I tell people when I first meet that if I've walked through it 2 weeks later, it's probably going to burn. So as long as you're in front of me, you're probably okay. But what I've pondered as I'm walking through these sections and I smell the smoke behind me when I'm not, worried I'm going to die. I ponder, I'm like, I bled back there. I sweated back there. I peed back there. Am I breathing in parts of me right now? Where do I end right now? Where does the trail begin? I have taken the trail into me. I have left pieces of myself out there. Where's that divide? It feels a lot more permeable, just like human skin is permeable. And that's what brings us back to this idea of the paradox of the ship of Theseus. So the paradox of the ship of Theseus, briefly, It's a philosophical thought experiment. And traditionally, people use the analogy of a ship to kind of explain what it means. It's questioning the nature of identity. What makes something itself? What makes human beings themselves? So the way people wrap their minds around this is with this analogy of the ship of Theseus. So you have this ship. Let's say you replace its steering wheel. It's probably not called a steering wheel. I don't drive ships. So, but let's say you replace its steering wheel with a new steering wheel. Is it the same ship? Okay, cool. Maybe yes. Well, what if you replace its sail? Assuming it's got a sail, it's still the same ship. What about the planks? What if you replace over time every single piece of this ship? Is it still the same ship? It's a really classic thought experiment in philosophy. And you can apply that to the human identity as well. I'm sticking just with physical identity just for sake of clarity. But if you think about the human body, we replace ourselves periodically so that after several years, the human body is no longer the same human body it was before. So at what point are you still the same person? How do you know? Where do you end and something else begins? So I had a deeper and slower and more thoughtful way of living and pondering this paradox when I'm leaving bits of myself all along the trail. So you keep walking. There are more of life's mysteries. You see more things. And you keep wondering. That says two horses loose in this area. So coming back to life's great mysteries, the next one I want to talk about is Schrodinger's cat. These poor guys probably don't want me to talk about cats, but there you are. So one of my favorite jokes, I Googled 20 jokes that only intellectuals will understand several years ago. This is one of my absolute favorite jokes. So Schrodinger's cat walks into a bar and doesn't. Yeah, if you get it, you get it, right? But I'm not going to explain it to you right away because that's not what we're doing today, right? I'm not just going to pull out the Google or the AI and explain to you what the Schrodinger's cat joke is and what Schrodinger's cat even means. Instead, I'm going to get back on the trail, metaphorically, and walk my way back to this understanding. So this is Mount Jefferson again. And I was showing you the part where you climb up and over the shoulder of the burned out section. Eventually you cross a violent glacial stream, they call them. And then you end up this is Jefferson Park. And it is, I swear to you, one of the prettiest places I have ever been. In fact, it's really hard to climb back up out of Jefferson Park. I think that's the trail over there. So you can if you ever see a hill on the Pacific Crest Trail, do not assume you are walking along it. You are descending and you are climbing, and just accept that. So one of the prettiest places, I think, on the Pacific Crest Trail, at least in Washington and Oregon. I have yet to do California. And it's really slow going, climbing out of here, because you just keep stopping and looking back and over your shoulder and thinking that's got to be a green screen. That cannot be real. That is so beautiful. And you look and you're like, there is the mountain. There is Mount Jefferson. But then the next day, you're like, but I was on the mountain. It's probably right about there. So my brain started spinning a little bit. Like, is that the mountain or was I on the mountain? I'm eyes are doing this a little bit because these two themes seem to be true at the exact same time. There's the mountain, but I was on the mountain. So I keep walking. I get to Mount Hood, okay, next one up the line. This is, I think this is just above Timberline Lodge. So I could be wrong. I think that on the bottom right, I think it's Palmer Glacier, which is often known for being one of the places, might be the only place in the lower 48 of the United States that you can ski year round. You've got the ski lifts there. So this is pretty darn close to the top. And the PCT goes behind Timberline Lodge, right along the side of the mountain into Paradise Park. Another really gorgeous stretch. And you get here, you emerge from the trees, and you think to yourself, there's the mountain. But the tiniest shift of perspective, you realize that you're actually on the mountain. So this isn't true just obviously for Mount Hood and Mount Jefferson. You could keep going and eventually you get to Mount Adams. Also heartbreaking beautiful. There's the mountain. Every time I go through the Mount Adams Wilderness, John Denver plays in my head and I cry a little bit. So I guess this could have also been part of my tears because things get so stupid beautiful out there that I just crack and cry. So this was very close to where I camped for the night. And there's Mount Adams right there in all of its glory. But with nothing changing, nothing being done, nothing else shifted, except for your perspective. Once again, oops, I'm on the mountain. So it's probably right about here. So this is looks like it's about the timberline, right? So you'd be right in here. So no change except for perspective. Is that the mountain or am I on the mountain? And then you keep going. There's Glacier Peak, and you probably have a sense of how this is going to go. Over and over and over, you're living this experience. So Glacier Peak is a pretty cool one because most people have never seen it or heard of it. It's isolated. So it goes Jefferson, Hood, Adams, Rainier, which we always joke is a hoax because it's always covered by clouds and I never see it. So I just point and say hoax. And then Glacier Peak is next. And Glacier Peak is pretty isolated. So a lot of people have never seen or heard of it. And how I'm going about observing it is making it one or the other. Either there is the mountain, and I ended up having lunch that day right up in there. It's a beautiful, beautiful day. Or I'm actually on the mountain. This is up in there. So this is exactly the thing that I struggle to wrap my mind around when I'm thinking about Schrodinger's cat. Because what Schrodinger's cat asks you to do is to wrap your mind around the idea that two things can be true at the same time. Two opposing things can be true at the same time. And every time I'm up on the mountain and I'm having this moment where it's right there, I can see it, it's there, but I know when I walk the next day and I look back, I was on the mountain and it breaks my brain a little bit. Schrodinger's cat also breaks my brain a little bit. So I'm going to give you the brief explanation of Schrodinger's cat. So it's a quantum mechanics thing. And as Courtney was telling you at the beginning of the time, I'm an English teacher. I'm not a quantum theorist. I'm not a mechanic. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a STEM person. So one interpretation of quantum mechanics that I can wrap my mind around is that energy exists as a blend of a wave and a particle, but at the same time. So energy is actually two things at once. But when something happens to it, and apparently the act of observing it is enough, that state collapses and it becomes one thing or another, a wave, or it becomes a particle. So Schrodinger's cat is a way of wrapping your brain around this thought experiment. So you take a cat, you put it in a box, and there's a couple of different versions of Schrodinger's cat. This one is the easiest one to explain. So you take a cat, you put it in a box, and you put in a device that has a 50% chance of killing the cat, and then you seal up the box. So until the box is open, and again, there's a couple of different ways this thought experiment goes, but one way to think of it is until the box is open, the cat is in a superposition of being alive and dead at the same time. So it's got a 50-50 chance of being alive or dead. We're imagining that it's a quiet cat, right? You can't hear it. There's no physical way for you to know if the cat is alive or dead. So until you open the box to observe it, it exists in this superimposed state or this super position of being both alive and dead at the same time. Now, sometimes the thought experiment will involve if you open the box to check, you trigger the device, and now the cat's dead for sure. But the point is, until you shift your perspective, you shift your observation, you shift your way of thinking, the cat is both things at the same time. Then you open the box to determine if the cat is alive or dead, and your opening the box influences that state. This one's for my son, who is probably horrified that I have now metaphorically put into a box a cat and potentially killed it. It's really a cat guy. So as you can see, AI and Reddit gave me this explanation. But if I just got the explanation, I don't know that I would retain it or understand it as deeply as I retain and understand this explanation when I'm walking on the mountain and when my eyes are doing this. In fact, I cannot recall my 6 perplexity searches that I just read to you. And I read and implemented all of those solutions. And the only one I can recall was the Campbell's soup one because I had a tasty, tasty lunch from that and I can remember that. But Schrodinger's cat, it lives with me now. And the ship of Theseus, it also lives with me now. So get back on the trail and I keep walking. I keep getting curious and I keep wondering. Some mysteries are easy to answer. This was the all you can eat, but this buffet is famous on the Pacific Crest Trail. This was the all you can eat buffet, breakfast buffet at Timberline Lodge. People time their lives around this. And I was laughing at them. I got actually 5 plates down. And I'm like, amateurs, because you don't start with the meat. You start with the lighter stuff, and then that allows you to cram more stuff in your stomach. So I think I actually started with the fruit and then moved on to the pancakes, and then the eggs were last. And that's my conclusion, that get outside, speculate wildly. Sometimes you'll get a straight answer. Sometimes you'll get no answer. But sometimes you will understand more deeply some of the great mysteries and paradoxes, thought experiments that humans have been grappling with since humanity has been grappling. Thank you.
I'll come around with questions.
It sounds like you hiked by yourself most of the time, but did you also have a partner to hike with?
Oh, yes and no. So I always, well, I almost always hike by myself. Usually it goes along the lines of, hey, I'm going hiking this summer. And people are like, oh, do you want somebody to come along? And I said, sure, this is when I'm hiking. And then they don't. Or I'll say, I'm going hiking this summer. And if you want to come along with me, tell me and I'll change my plans. And then they don't. So one year I met this girl, Allie, on the Pacific Crest Trail. It was actually during 2020. And so height of COVID, right? It was a really interesting time because Europeans, well, people from all over the world hike the trail. And during the height of COVID, people weren't allowed to fly into the United States from most countries. So what the Europeans would do, and I can laugh about it now because, they would fly into Costa Rica, which was one of the places that you could fly from Costa Rica into the United States, and then they'd fly into the United States from that way, and then they'd hike. So I met Allie during the height of COVID, and weight is an issue when you're hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, especially climbing over those trees, right? You don't want to be hauling a lot of stuff. And Allie is this miraculously strange hiker who will bring fresh produce. And not only will she bring fresh produce, but she will share it. So I met her, we were walking past each other, and it's COVID, so we're really keeping apart. And she's like, do you want this half of an avocado? And it's so early in the pandemic that we're not quite sure still, like, is it safe? Can I do that? And so our solution was she reached out as far as she could, And I reached out as far as I could, and I got myself an avocado. And then we just kept meeting. So I would roll into camp that night, and there would be Allie. And then the next night I'd roll into camp, and there would be Allie. And finally we're like, we should just hike together. And that was, I think, the only time I've ever planned and executed a hiking trip with somebody else. The next year we did 75-ish miles from Crater Lake to Willamette Pass Shelter Cove. But beyond that, it's usually, and I love this and I prefer this, you start alone and then you either continue alone or you end up with people like Allie who just are matching your pace. So this last time I ended up with, his trail name was Sasquatch. His name is Marcus. He's from Orange County, California. And we just kept, again, camping in the same spot every night. And it got to be so funny that, because we scattered. And then he was sending messages back to me with the southbound hikers. And they're like, are you Sandbagger? Because that was my trail name. And I'm like, yes. Do I know you? And they're like, Sasquatch says he's only this far ahead. And then I'd be walking a little bit further. Are you Sandbagger? Yes. How do you know? Sasquatch wants us to tell you that he's only this far ahead. And we actually met back up at the northern terminus at the Canadian border, which was pretty great. And then we hiked back together because Canada doesn't let us enter the country anymore. So once you tag the border, you have to backtrack 30 miles. They call it the victory lap. And so we ended up hiking that 30 miles together. So usually alone. But the beautiful thing about being alone is it opens you up to meet some really wonderful people. And I think the best people are out on the trail.
Speaking of Sasquatch, what's up with the Yeti watch?
Isn't that cool? So that's in Oregon. I think it's around the Warm Springs Reservation. And so I've hiked through there several times because in 2018 I did that stretch, in 2019, 2020, 2022 when I did all of Oregon. It's always there. And if you look at the actual picture, these are two pictures that I took in 2 different years. And you'll notice that people maintain the Sasquatch meter. A lot of slides here. There we go.
There it is.
Yeah, so the picture on the right, the Bigfoot is kind of faded. So people go through and they maintain the Sasquatch meter, and it's not always set to medium. I don't know who has these are things that I wonder. These are answers that I have not received. Who has the authority to change the Sasquatch meter? What does medium mean? And it's not always on medium. So what does low mean? And what should I do if the danger is high? I still don't know.
Are there any other questions?
Does Schrodinger's cat have a name?
Does Schrodinger's cat have a name?
What should the name of Schrodinger's cat be? Cat. We have decided that its name is Cat, more formally known as CAT. Yes.
Okay. Oh, one more.
You showed some pictures of, can I eat this? But did you eat mostly stuff that you brought with you, or did you eat things along the trail?
Say that again.
Did you eat things that you found?
Oh, sometimes. So the very first picture, I knew what those were. So I grew up in Washington State, and I know what a huckleberry looks like. And I mean, you can tell there's a whole, we actually have quite the debate about the difference between huckleberries and blueberries. And again, no cell phone service, so you can't really just look it up. Is this a huckleberry or a blueberry? Very intense focus of conversation for several days. Assuming that's a huckleberry, grown up in the region, I know the berries that I can eat. I learned from a former chef out of Las Vegas that thimbleberries are edible, which I did not know. The things that I would not eat because I didn't know were the mushrooms. Although one year, it was actually one of the harder years that I hiked. I was on the waiting list for a hip surgery, and so I was in a lot of pain. And it was the year that I kept calling Mount Rainier a hoax because it was either so rainy, so foggy, or so smoky that I was in Mount Rainier National Park and I did not see the mountain. So it was a hard year anyways. And then when things are hard, I get hungry. And I'd be looking at these mushrooms and I'm like, that looks like a steak. I really want to eat that. And I didn't because death bad. But I met a French couple later on who had been eating them all along and sauteing them in butter. And I was so angry. So typically, I bring my own food. You can forage. Marcus, the person who kept sending messages back to me, his friend Pete at every campsite would stop, get out a bowl, and pick all the berries. And then, why would I share? They're right there. Go pick them yourself. But usually, you bring. I brought a lot of dehydrated meals. Some that I bought, some that I dried myself, some that I asked Perplexity how to dry.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Heidi, and thank you to our audience for coming in today. And please join us again next week for our finale of the series.
You overcorrected?